Winding down week 2 on the campaign trail, the Liberals are still in the lead as the leaders descend on Quebec. This is Now You Know on News Radio.
The answers you need
from the people in the know.
This is Now You Know with Rob Snow on News Radio.
I'm David Smith, in for Rob Snow today. Thank you for joining us. It is day 13 of the federal election campaign, 24 days to go until Election Day, if anyone is counting. Party leaders are back on the campaign trail today. Mark Carney, Jagmeet Singh, and Pierre Poilievre all have had events in Quebec this morning. With the latest from the hustings, I'm joined now by Cormac MacSweeney, our Parliament Hill bureau chief. Hi, Cormac.
Hey, David.
So the dust is still kind of settling after the tariff announcement on Wednesday, but the leaders are not talking tariffs today. Mark Carney has taken off his prime minister hat, and he's back to being the campaigning Liberal leader. He was in Montreal this morning. What did Mark Carney announce?
Well, his announcement revolved around the CBC and Radio-Canada, the French wing of the CBC. He's promising to try and innovate, strengthen the public broadcaster. That includes several different measures like developing a governance plan to improve accountability and empower leadership. I think that's a point to the previous head of the CBC, Catherine Tate, who had several controversies under her belt, but also to get back into what they call the institution's innovative spirit. They want to promote more Canadian culture. They want to give new digital tools to the CBC. And through all of this, they will do that by providing an additional $150 million in funding to the public broadcaster. And then in doing so, also taking some shots at the Conservatives who have promised to defund the CBC, but not Radio-Canada. It's kind of a nuanced position there from the Conservatives. But, you can't escape tariff talk. I don't think that dust will completely settle. And, of course, Carney was asked about the Trump tariff situation. And more specifically, interestingly, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith's recent comments after Canada got that exemption from the reciprocal tariffs while still being hit with auto tariffs. And she called it a big win and made it seem as if, the worst was over for Canada. And Carney sort of dismissing that idea, saying that we're still hit with tariffs. Our economy is still in a bad shape. The global economy is in a very tough position right now as a result of the actions from Trump. And he said this is no time to celebrate. This is a time to protect workers and try and rebuild our economy. So I think every leader is probably going to be facing some tariff questions, regardless of whether they're announcing it or not. But you're right. The announcements today are removed from the tariff situation.
Yes, but it is always looming. Financial markets still down today as well. No real rebound after the sell-off following the tariff announcement on Wednesday. Let's talk about the New Democrats. Leader Jagmeet Singh, also in Montreal this morning. What was he talking about?
Well, he's talking about something that the NDP has talked about for many years now, but tying it into the tariff situation and trying to help generate revenue for our economy by cracking down on corporate tax dodgers. It's not a new subject. It's been around for a long time. One that the NDP has been calling for to try and bring in stricter rules to prevent companies from using things like offshore tax havens. And he's tying it, of course, to Mark Carney and his time as chair of Brookfield, a company that dealt with a lot of investments and investors here in Canada, including pension funds. And the issue is that it was brought to light through the campaign that they used the Bermuda as a tax haven as a part of their investments. And they're attacking Carney and saying that all corporations that use that need to pay taxes here in Canada. They're accusing Brookfield of dodging about $5 billion worth of taxes. Carney's response, he was asked about this as well, and his response throughout this has been, look, this is kind of the way business is done. And in a way, because these companies use these offshore tax havens for these investments, it is driving more revenue to investors here in Canada who still have to pay taxes on the revenues that they make. It's just the way they structure things in order to generate bigger returns for those Canadian investors. So his argument is they're still paying their taxes. It's just bringing more money into Canada, and those investors then spend that money here in Canada. So it's good for the economy. That's just the way the economy works. And the NDP response to that is, look, this is unfair. On principle, we can't allow companies to dodge taxes, and they need to pay their fair share. So that'll be a question for voters at voting time.
Yeah, the figure the NDP has come up with is $5.3 billion. They figure that's how much Canadian tax Brookfield has avoided paying under Mark Carney's leadership. And finally, the Conservative Party leader, Pierre Poilievre, he is in Trois-Rivières, Quebec today. He's speaking right now, actually, in French, but we have a bit of a heads up on what his announcement for today is. What is Mr. Poilievre focused on?
Yeah, Poilievre going back to a common conservative theme, and that is crime and punishment. It appears, we just got the release, that they want to create a new offense around the assault of an intimate partner, and they want to bring in stricter bail conditions for anyone accused of intimate partner violence, including mandatory GPS ankle bracelet monitoring and immediate imprisonment if there are breach of conditions. Usually judges do send people to prison when people breach their bail conditions, but nonetheless, they want to make it mandatory so there's no wiggle room there. And they don't want to allow anybody convicted of murder when it comes to, an intimate partner or a child, that they could see their charge brought down to manslaughter, that it would have to be a first-degree murder charge. So I assume there will be more questions about the details around that and whether or not some of these measures would be charter compliant. But that's the announcement that they're making today and what they're pushing on the campaign trail today.
All right, I'll let you get back to that live event happening now, Cormac MacSweeney. Thank you for the update. Appreciate it.
Anytime.
That is Cormac MacSweeney. He's keeping an eye on everything happening on the campaign trail for us today. I'm David Smith, in for Rob Snow, Barry McLoughlin. Just ahead, don't go anywhere. This is Now You Know on News Radio.
Critical thinking is not dead.
Now You Know with Rob Snow
Returns on News Radio.
David Smith here, in for Rob Snow today. Thank you for joining us. Joining me now, as he does at this time every week, is Barry McLoughlin. Barry is president of TLC Transformational Leadership Consultants. He lectures at the Telford School of Management at the University of Ottawa and also at the Shannon School of Business at Cape Breton University. And around here, he is our expert in political communications, crisis management, branding, and leadership. Hello, Barry. How are you?
Hello, David. Nice to see you again.
Always good to have you on, especially during campaign time, Barry. So first, we're asking you every Friday of the campaign, who won the week, Poilievre or Carney?
I believe Carney won, and Carney won because he got to play Premier, Prime Minister, for the most critical announcement of our economic future in a long, long time before and going forward. So this is a very major event, and he was able to fly home. They even covered live his departure of his plane from Winnipeg, arrival in Ottawa. It was an event, and he played it well. He played the event well, but he wore his Prime Minister's hat, and Mr. Poilievre, of course, wasn't able to do that. He had to find his space in reaction. It was obviously not going to be as big an event by definition. And so, therefore, I thought it was definitely Mr. Carney's week.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would agree with that, just based on the events of the week alone. It was a potentially pivotal moment for this election campaign. Wednesday, so-called Liberation Day, an opportunity for both Poilievre and Mark Carney to respond directly to the threat posed by this trade war with the U.S. And ultimately, the tariff news was not as devastating as it could have been. Most Canadian exports to the U.S. are spared new tariffs, but again, if you're one of the workers at that Stellantis plant or one of the people who's been laid off at Algoma Steel or what have you, not really much comfort in that. So how do you think the leaders handled themselves specifically when it comes to responding to the tariff news? Starting with Mark Carney, How do you think he did on Wednesday and on Thursday with the response?
Well, he was very low-key in his response. He wasn't attacking Trump personally. He clearly said Canada is going to be doing retaliatory tariffs. And he delayed a little bit and then announced that we would tax 25% on American auto imports into Canada. So I think that really did, that was his response, holding open future ones, which I think was wise because you don't know the full picture yet. So I think he did very, very cool, very low key. He got on all the American networks. I saw clips of him, and therefore, he's pretty well decided. I think this is his role. He's going to be the calm, hand on the tiller, during these stormy seas. I think that's really what his approach is. In contrast to really Mr. Poilievre, I thought Pierre Poilievre did a solid job. He was ready with his 5% GST cut, initiative. I thought he seemed he had his act together, very knowledgeable about it. Didn't get overtly partisan in part of the response. So I'd have to give him a solid marks for how he handled it. And actually, to be fair to Mr. Singh, he actually had a solid response. His idea was to create these, what they call Liberty bonds or something. And so to raise money for the infrastructure investments. It's kind of different from just taking it directly out of the taxpayer's pocket. So I thought it was pretty clever, and he did a solid job too.
Yeah, at least he is part of the conversation. I think that's the struggle for the NDP campaign right now, is staying relevant. I do want to go back to Poilievre for a minute, though, because we did hear a bit of a stronger tone from Poilievre. Before the tariff announcement, he'd been under all this pressure to reorient the campaign messaging around trade and Trump, less on attacking Carney and the Liberal record. We got a taste of that on Wednesday. Just a short clip here to illustrate what I'm talking about.
First and foremost, we will protect Canadian sovereignty. Certain things will be non-negotiable. We will protect our land, our water, our laws, our government, our culture, our language policies, and our borders will always be exclusively under our control.
See, I think that's the tone that Corey Tanaik and others were looking for, but is it believable from Poilievre?
Well, yes, I think it is. I mean, it's within his zone. I mean, he is not being inconsistent with the points he's made before. But you are right. This was definitely a half pivot for sure this week. He stopped just doing endless attacks. He certainly did his share of attacks at Carney, especially related to China. He kept on hammering him on that. So you're never going to give that up in a campaign. But I think he realized, that this cannot. You stop going on about the carbon tax. We now need to, we see you as a future prime minister. You got to act like one. So I thought that he did do a half pivot. He is quite skillful. Just watching him right now do a news conference and speech, and he handles media well when he chooses to. He comes across, I think, very solidly, and I think the half pivot is working. But I think he's got to fully unveil, what his values are driving him, not just slogans, but real connectedness to people. He still has he's got a big disconnect between him and the voter. That has to be overcome. There has to be a likability factor. Anybody you're going to elect to be prime minister. So he has a ways to go, but it was a good start. He had a good week, I think.
Okay. All right. That's a good place to stop for our break here. We'll be back in just a few moments with Barry. We'll continue talking about the campaign, looking ahead to the next potentially pivotal moment in this election race. There are two leaders' debates coming up in about a week and a half from now. We'll talk to Barry about that when we come back. I'm David Smith, in for Rob Snow today. This is News Radio.
Now you know with Rob Snow continues on News Radio.
Hey, it's David Smith here in for Rob Snow today. Thank you for joining us. I'm speaking with Barry McLoughlin, President, TLC, Transformational Leadership Consultants. And Barry, picking up where we left off before the break, the next potentially pivotal moment for this election campaign is in a little less than 2 weeks. April 16th and 17th are debate nights. Leaders will face off in French first on the 16th, then in English on the 17th. So how big a role do you think these debates will play in this race?
I think they're going to be really, really important. Sometimes they're just discounted as changing thing. But I've been involved in enough debate preps that the entire election has turned around based on the debate performance of that leader. Two in my mind, or in particular, standing out of my mind. But the fact of the matter is that Pierre Poilievre is 5, 8, 10% behind, depending on which poll you're looking at. We know he's behind. The question is that what is it going to take for him to turn the corner on that? And I think the debate is the chance for him to do it. The expectation is a lot of it. So the French debate, we expect Pierre Poilievre to do better than Mr. Carney, and therefore he has to live up to that. Carney has to survive that and be relatively decent and not embarrassing and hit his mark and be low-key enough about it, because I don't think he has the necessary confidence to passionately express things, perhaps, but at least he has to be decent in it. The English one will be, I believe, everything. The English one is so important, and a lot of leaders just get it wrong. They start arguing with each other rather than looking into the. I always, when I walk onto the stage with the leader in advance, my first question is, what's his or her close-up camera? That's what I want to know. Thank you. And 90% of your responses are into and through that camera lens, and you're sitting in the living room of your average Canadian at the end of the sofa having a conversation with them. That's the tone. That's the approach. So a lot of them, they just get into the heat of the moment and they lose sight of that altogether. So I think that's number one. Number two is, it's a double-edged sword. One edge is, yes, you're push back and cut on the other leader, what he has failed to do. And the other side is what you would do as prime minister. You always have to have the two in motion. You can't just do one. You really have to do both, and especially for Mr. Poilievre. And of course, Carney doesn't have to win it outright, but he shouldn't have any flagrant loss in it either. There shouldn't be somebody, oh my God, what a terrible error here. This isn't Gerald Ford, way back saying that, Poland is free and all this stuff. It was just sort of like out of the top of his head. He probably won't do that. He's a very careful, cautious person. But he has to make sure he doesn't have one of those embarrassing moments. I think each of them will practice their sound bites, because that is really what ends up traveling around, And so it's like when Jack Layton said to Michael Ignatieff, you didn't show up you only showed up for 25% of the debates in the House. Canadians know if they don't show up for work, they don't get paid. Boom, that was a soundbite. That was a prepared soundbite. Each of these are prepared. They got to be crisp. They got to nail it. And each of them will be working on that for sure.
Okay. Thank you for those thoughts, Barry. We're just about out of time for this week, but we look forward to catching up with you again next Friday, and who knows what we'll be talking about. Certainly the election race, but we'll see what events unfold between now and then. Excellent. Thank you so much, Barry. Take care.
Thank you, David.
That's Barry McLoughlin, President, TLC, Transformational Leadership Consultants. He is our expert on communications, leadership, and debates. Barry's done a lot of debate prep with a lot of different people, including former prime ministers. Great to have his thoughts today. Just coming up to the bottom of the hour, I am David Smith, in for Rob Snow today. Tom Korski is standing by. We'll take a look at some of the top stories from Blacklock's reporter. That's when we come back. This is News Radio.
Now you know with Rob Snow continues on News Radio.
It's David Smith here, filling in for Rob Snow today. Thank you for joining us. Welcome back to the show. Tom Korski is here. He is the managing editor of Blacklock's Reporter, minding Ottawa's business. He joins us at this time every Friday. Hey, Tom, how are you?
I'm well, thank you, David.
Excellent. Quite a week of news, and you have some really interesting stories at Blacklock's this week. I want to start talking about the man who would be Canada's next prime minister. Tell us what you have learned about Mark Carney's lobbying activity on behalf of Brookfield in China.
The timing is terrible, David. This is not ancient history. On October 20th, we only know this because the People's Government of Beijing released a statement after the fact. Last October 20th, Mark Carney, as chair of Brookfield Asset Management, had a private meeting with the mayor of Beijing. By the way, that's not like meeting a mayor in Canada. In Beijing, the mayoralty is a top-flight Communist Party Central Committee appointment. This is one of the guys who calls the shots. It's a big deal. And he had a private meeting. And what did the Beijing city government say about the meeting? Well, they said Mr. Carney sought deepening cooperation with the People's Republic. It went on to say that Carney highlighted his company's keen interest in seizing opportunities in China and further expanding its business, etc. Problem, at the exact moment that Carney was trying to cut some deals with the Communist Party in Beijing, the federal cabinet back here in Ottawa had already imposed tariffs on China over their electric cars for predatory trade practices that Liberal cabinet said will cripple our industry, quote, end of quote. And here you have a man who is having a closed-door meeting, David, with the predators to talk about how they can do some nice business together. And at no time do you get the impression that it occurred to Carney that this could be awkward because I'm thinking about becoming the leader of a G7 country. It's frankly unbelievable.
Yeah. Quote, Carney highlighted Brookfield Asset Management's keen interest in seizing development opportunities in China, further expanding its businesses in Beijing, and deepening cooperation with relevant partners in areas such as green finance, fund management, and infrastructure development. That's not a light agenda. And on top of that, so this was October of last year, October 20th. Now, if I have the calendar on this right, Tom, that was after Carney had been appointed a special economic advisor to then Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. He was doing this lobbying after he had started officially advising Justin Trudeau on economic policies. Do I have that right?
Exactly right. But wait, there's more. Carney was asked about China just the other day, March 26, by reporters down at the Detroit Bridge crossing. And the reporter said, well, how about dealing with China? And we expected him to say what he told the mayor of Beijing. We need to deepen ties and seek cooperation. Funny, that's not what he said. He said we need like-minded partners that share our values and meet Canadian standards. And China doesn't meet the criteria. Well, this is complex now. Look at me. Today, I'm meeting the mayor of Beijing. I'm a pro-China guy. And now I'm the prime minister of a G7 country, and China doesn't meet my standards. This is confusing, almost beyond human comprehension, but that's your prime minister.
Well, he wears a lot of hats. He
Many
his
hats.
Brookfield hat, which he has relegated to the back of the closet. Then he's got his prime minister hat. He's got his liberal leadership hat. A lot of hats for Mark Carney. All right, so let's move right along here to another story. How much is the government spending on lawyers to deal with processing asylum seeker claims?
It's big money. They're up to $55 million a year. We see this from the Department of Justice in one of their departmental memos. They say the cost of this is legal aid for illegal immigrants or refugee claimants. The cost for the taxpayer up 378%, almost 400%. There has been documentation in the past, coincidentally, by the Courts Administration Service, which runs federal courthouses right across the country. They said, look, these claims are killing us. Like a quadruple, tens of thousands of court filings by illegal immigrants or refugee claimants who are getting taxpayer-funded lawyers who are, for instance, challenging deportation orders. These costs, you talk about unintended consequences of poorly managed immigration. We're now into the realm on lawyers' fees alone, $55 million. Courts administration, they needed another $10 million top up. This is just the beginning. It's millions and millions of dollars, David.
Okay, we'll stop here, and when we come back, more with Tom Korski from Blacklock's Reporter. I'm David Smith, in for Rob Snow today. This is News Radio.
There is no question Rob won't get answered.
Now You Know with Rob Snow continues
On News Radio.
David Smith here, in for Rob Snow today. We're back with Tom Korski from Blacklock's Reporter. Just before the break, Tom, we were talking about the increasing cost for these lawyers to adjudicate asylum seeker claims. I just want to pick back up on that. A couple more details I think are important. There's a bit of a backlog, right? Tell me about the backlog with these asylum seeker cases. Has it gotten worse recently?
Well, the difficulty is the number of claims that are filed, the number that is backlogged at the Immigration and Refugee Board, and the number of trials that you have to have. So what are the numbers? Refugee claims backlogged at the board. So if I get a deportation order, I want to appeal that, I get a hearing. They have now gone up sixfold. This is just in the last 5 years. So let's look at, I lose at the board, and then I'd like to get my legal aid lawyer to file that claim down at the federal courthouse. What has happened to those applications? They've quadrupled to 25,000 last year. And then I'm really insistent. I want to go to trial with my legal aid lawyer. And the number of trials that have occurred where the Department of Immigration is the defendant have now gone up, let's see, from 600 a year, more or less, to 1,100 a year, almost doubled. Do you know how expensive this is? Even the courts administration has said, courts are here so people can get access to justice, but not just illegal immigrants. That could apply to anyone in our country. David, the consequences when you see this, do you know to this day, there has never been a complete costing on what illegal immigration, what undocumented immigration, and refugee claimants have cost from housing, education, social assistance, public health care, now down to court fees. It's huge.
And the problem is, once these cases are in the system, they have to make their way through the system. There's no way to speed this up, really. And then there's also the appeals process. And as I understand it, we're getting a lot more appeals of deportation orders, possibly, I guess, to do with the number of temporary foreign workers whose permits may be expiring. They're trying to stay in the country. Is that kind of the picture we're seeing here?
Oh, absolutely. And do you remember when the Minister of Immigration, former Minister Mark Miller, famously said, we're going to crack down on foreign students, no more monkey business with foreign students. Do you know what happened? We've seen this in the Department of Immigration's internal documents. Tens of thousands of foreign students who lost their permits said, oh, okay, I think I'm going to apply for refugee status now. And they're still in the country. You're talking about the passage of 2, 3, 4 years for these claims to wind their way through the system. And even once you get a deportation order, that doesn't mean you're deported. The Canada Border Services Agency has acknowledged it loses track of thousands of people every year. How many foreigners are in Canada without permit status, which means they're illegal? The official estimate is up to 500,000. It's staggering numbers.
Yeah. The Department of Immigration counted 1.9 million non-permanent residents last year. All of those people are on temporary permits, and when they expire, the officials need to follow up with them, find them. If they don't have a right to be here, they have to issue a deportation order, which can then be appealed. You get the picture. You get the sense that this is a giant mountain of bureaucratic inertia with no real end in sight. So that'll be another file for the incoming prime minister to tackle, in addition to everything else. All right, I want to move along here. This is a very interesting one, not just for me because I work in the media, but I think for everybody because the news media environment in this country is in poor standing. I would say trust in the media is not where it should be. It's basically at an all-time low. one of the reasons why people trust us in the media less than they used to, and I wish that they would. I have your best interest at hearts. All of my listeners, you can trust me, please. The government has a new subsidy scheme, Tom, a new subsidy scheme for the news media, specifically in this election season. So what's on offer?
No matter how thin you slice this, it comes up looking sleazy. I'm incredulous that they thought they'd get away with this. There's a federally sponsored group called the Michener Awards Foundation, and they typically every year give out the Canadian version of the Pulitzer Prize to newspaper reporters who do snappy stories that they like. So far, so good. Wait a minute. The Michener Awards Foundation decided it's going to give out $35,000 cash grants to help accredited media cover the election, in which, did you know, media subsidies are an actual issue. Who is going to decide who gets the $35,000 cash? Well, there's a panel. It consists of, for instance, a former CBC managing editor, a former Toronto Star editor, the lobbyist for the subsidized newspapers. But my favorite is the head of the panel is a former Winnipeg Free Press editor who has written in the past about how she wishes the Liberal Party, I quote Margot accurately, Margot Goodhand, would stand up to the bullies in the Conservative Party. We wish Justin Trudeau well, she once wrote in an editorial. Canadian politics needs to take a new tack, and Trudeau has the power and momentum. It was an extremely enthusiastic endorsement. I wonder who's going to get the $35,000 cash awards, Dave. I wonder.
Yeah, it's kind of stupefying, right? Like, we have the problem. What is the problem? People don't trust the media. What's our solution? Let's take a former journalist who wrote an op-ed in support of Justin Trudeau in the 2015 election and make her in charge of doling out subsidies for reporters reporting on the election. That'll fix it. And look, I'm not saying, there's no evidence to suggest that any reporter who is benefiting from this money even knows that they're receiving the money.
Oh, they know. Oh, no.
Individually speaking.
They know. David, we're one step away from having buckets full of cash that reporters can scoop up as they walk into a news conference. We are so far deep into sleaze country. We don't have to pretend anymore. They know.
At a certain point, where you should be able to realize what you're doing that you think is helping is making the problem worse, and you should stop doing that. Unbelievable. And do we ever get to find out which outlets actually take the money? Do they have to disclose that? Is there a registry?
I love everything about this. David, I'm not a gambling man. The election is October 28th. On October 29th, we will be asking the foundation for the names of everyone who applied, everyone who got money, and everyone who didn't. And what do you think the odds are, $1 to a donut, that they decide to keep that a secret?
Wow. All right, well, we'll stay tuned on that one, see if we ever find out who got the $35,000. I'm not holding my breath. All right, finally for this week, I want to talk foreign interference. On foreign interference, we have new concerns from the RCMP about post-secondary campuses in Canada. What are we learning?
RCMP in a memo say it is no joke. They name one country. Only one country is named, and it's the People's Republic of China. They say that they are targeting campuses, and particularly universities, and it's not just to make trouble for people who say things about China they don't like. The RCMP memo says they are talent scouting, they are talent spotting, they are looking for stooges who express sympathies for the People's Republic and the Chinese Communist Party. This is happening at campuses now. What's odd and jarring is that you would hear that from the RCMP, not Universities Canada. They're not getting on it, Dave. They're just not doing it. It's inexplicable.
Yeah, and it's not like, dissidents and that sort of thing are new on university campuses, but you would think that given the climate that we're in with election interference, the governing body for these institutions would at least have some knowledge of it, but doesn't seem to be the case.
Well, there's never been a statement. What does the Mounties say? This is their words. This is a memo written for the commissioner. I quote it accurately. Universities can be used as venues for talent spotting and intelligence collection in specific circumstances, end of quote. There's been parliamentary committee testimony from a couple of faculty members at some universities who've said they've been approached pretty much with cash in a paper sack and asked if they want to play ball in terms of, let alone industrial espionage on intellectual property and patents. This is happening, and universities apparently are oblivious.
Okay, that's our time this week. Tom, thank you so much, as always, for joining us here on the show, sharing some of the excellent work that you do there at Blacklock's Reporter. Until next week, my friend. We'll talk to you then.
Thank you, David.
That is Tom Korski, managing editor, Blacklock's Reporter, minding Ottawa's business, and aren't you glad somebody is? I'm David Smith, in for Rob Snow. This is News Radio.
You have questions
Now You Know with Rob Snow has the answers.
on News Radio.
Rob is off today. It's David Smith here, keeping you company on the show. Thank you for joining us. Coming up to the top of the hour, and then after the news, it will be the Friday free-for-all Talkback. Yes, the phone lines will be open in just a few short minutes, and I'm really looking forward to hearing from all of you on all of the news this week. Friday free-for-all, so we're wide open on topics. The campaign, of course, continues to be the top story of the week, and one of the campaign angles, the storylines that we've been talking about, is these rallies that Pierre Poilievre has been having. In 13 days of campaigning now, Poilievre has had 9 rallies, packing in crowds in the thousands. Even liberal commentators are saying these are impressive rallies. And he had another one last night, and it got kind of nutty before it even began. So the Conservative campaign says they packed 6,500 people into an airport hangar in Oshawa, Ontario. By some accounts, that was maybe too many people. Listen to this. This is a report from Politico, who was at the rally. Quote, 4 people fainted or experienced medical emergencies. 2 were taken away in ambulances. Supporters twice had to shout at Poilievre to pause his remarks so people could get help. Staffers, who typically work on Parliament Hill, ran around trying to help while simultaneously trying to ensure Poilievre ended his rally on time, because he was due to appear virtually on Radio-Canada's 5 Chefs Une Election program at 8 p.m. Traveling press secretary Carson Bradley climbed a ladder at one point in an attempt to get the attention of Poilievre to wrap up. The rally started nearly 30 minutes late because of the first medical emergency. The hype music was cut off and a nurse in the crowd actually performed CPR. End quote. I believe the gentleman who passed out was okay. He was treated by paramedics on scene, and Poilievre brought the nurse who helped up on stage.
But before I go any further, let me just acknowledge that we had a terrible medical emergency here. A gentleman collapsed, and we thought we'd lost him. But then an amazing and courageous nurse came to the rescue. Jennifer, come up on stage. Come on over. Thank you. Give Jennifer a big round of applause. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you. Thank you, Jennifer. What a hero. Amazing, Jennifer. How long have you been a nurse for?
Oh, that's a tough one. 17, 18 years old.
Wow. Here in Oshawa? Amazing. Well, on behalf of everyone in this room, and behalf of the blessed gentleman who I believe is in the loving hands of our paramedics, doctors, and nurses, we say thank you, thank you, thank you. You are a great Canadian hero.
So yeah, if you're heading to one of those Pierre Poilievre rallies, just be careful. Keep your wits about you. Talkback is next on News Radio.
It's time to talk back.
On Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Call now.
And have your say.
1-833-668-2577.
Welcome to Talkback. I'm David Smith, in for Rob Snow today. Thank you for joining us. Phone lines are open now. 1-833-668-2577. I'll say that again. 1-833-668-2577. That is the number to call to get on the air, have your say, make your opinions known. Weigh in on the news of the day, the issues impacting the nation. And on Fridays around here, we do the Friday Free-for-All. No set topics. We can discuss whatever you want to bring up. I'll follow your lead. I have a few things I wouldn't mind getting into, a few hot takes to throw at you as we make our way through the program. We have 2 hours for debate and conversation. Please take advantage. I'd love to hear from you today. Whatever is on your mind that you want to talk about. That's why we're here. Call now, 1-833-668-2577, and let's talk about it. I mean, the big news of the week is tariffs, of course. The dust has settled a bit now. There's still lots of questions about how this latest round of tariffs is going to work and how it's going to impact the economy. But the consensus is, based on the analysis that I have read anyway, these tariffs, if they are here for more than, say, a couple months, it's going to be very bad. Very bad for the economy. In fact, I was just reading a piece in the break. Given the impact of these tariffs, it's very possible we might see another rate cut from the Bank of Canada. So on the one hand, that would be some relief for people carrying a lot of debt. On the other hand, not good if you're not in the housing market, because that will, of course, charge demand for housing again. So it's a mess. It's a fine mess that we're in with the economy. A lot of jobs are at stake. There's a real human element behind these numbers. We're staring down the barrel of a recession. And there are people who are already off work or out of work. Still, we didn't get hit as hard as we could have been. It's not as bad as it could have been. We didn't get hit with the across-the-board tariffs Trump had once promised. That apocalyptic scenario seems to be off the table for now. A lot of other countries weren't so lucky, if you consider us lucky. But targeted tariffs are no picnic either, right? If you work in the auto sector, in aluminum or steel, or in potash or in energy, I'm sure you're feeling anxious. And I'll admit, I'm feeling anxious about where all of this is going. And I don't even work in a trade-exposed industry. There are no tariffs on the radio. But I'm anxious, seriously, about where this is all going. How are you feeling about the state of things? How are you coping with the trade war? Have you been impacted personally? Have you been impacted personally yet? Would love to hear, if you have, how this is affecting you personally. Have the tariffs had a direct impact on you yet? 1-833-668-2577. Give me a call and let me know. Let's get to the phones. Up first today, we have Rick in Halifax. Hey, Rick, you're on the air.
How you doing?
I'm fine.
Yeah,
What's
how
up?
you doing?
Yeah, go ahead.
You were talking about the erosion of trust in the media.
Yes.
And my point on that is, the polls, they're all saying that the Liberals are leading in the polls.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's no way that the Liberals are leading in the polls, and it's a bunch of hogwash. So people now start to look at the media, and wherever the source of the media is getting that from, is all they're doing is tainting themselves. Because there's no way that the Conservative Party lost 30 points in overnight to Mark Carney.
Why not?
Well, it's impossible. You're painting the same scenario that they did about Donald Trump south of the border. Kamala Harris was leading, the Democrats are leading, and all of a sudden they just got swept.
Well, most of the polls before the U.S. election had it pretty close. There was one big outlier poll, but it was just one. I mean, when you look at the trend is pretty clear. All of these pollsters, there's like 7 or 8 of them, they all have the same trend line.
Well, they can have all the trend lines they want. But I'll tell you, all of the people that are showing up at Pierre Poilievre's rallies are not a figment of people's imagination. And people are sick and tired of the Liberals in this country. And if you think that changed overnight, and if you think Mark Carney, if he was a real, true hero to the Canadian people, he'd repeal Bill C-69, and he will not do that, and he's already said he won't do that. So he's not going to help Canada. He's not a nation builder. So I don't believe the polls, and people don't believe the polls, and all that does is maybe as a news organization, you should maybe create your own poll organizations so that you can independently verify what these people are trying to tell you or not telling you.
All right, Rick. Well, thank you for the call today. Appreciate your thoughts on the matter. Thank you. Have a good weekend. Yeah, it's not in our budget here to expand the scope of Rogers Sports and Media into the public opinion research business. That's not in the budget. We don't even get coffee anymore. Let's go to Kyle in Listowel. Hey, Kyle, what's up? You're on the air.
You forgot to tell them that you do conduct a poll when Rob Snow asks people, what are you going to be voting for?
That is true. We do those polls, and they always skew conservative. So there you go.
That's right. So there you go. So the other thing I want to say is I feel like right now Canada and the United States are in a hockey match.
Okay.
Like the NHL. You've got, your Edmonton and Alberta in that section. They're in the Western Conference. You've got the American side. Well, now we're a Canadian team trying to fight the Americans on hockey, trying to win the Stanley Cup. You've got the Eastern side, Ontario, Quebec. The East Coast of Canada. We're all fighting with each other. And I've never, I have my own business, as you know, I do deliveries and courier and LTL, which is less than truckload. I haven't personally been affected by the tariffs. I know customers that have, but I think that their focus more on is now doing more business within Canada instead of just the United States as well. So I feel like it hasn't affected me or my customers too much yet. But I'm also, where I live in Ontario, which if people know, or if people don't know, it's Perth County. And Perth County is known for two things, agricultural and manufacturing. And I've talked to this with a bunch of the other small businesses around, and they always say that we're one of the lucky ones because when a recession does hit, we're probably going to be one of the last areas to actually feel it by the time Canada gets it. So it's kind of hard for me to say on that aspect, but yeah, I feel like, we're all fighting with each other, and, it just needs to stop, because I think the more we fight with each other interprovincially or across Canada, I feel like just more stressed out we get, to be honest. That's what it feels like to me. It's like, we're stressing ourselves out by fighting with each other versus trying to feel the source of the problem, which is the States. But that's just my opinion. David, I just want to say have a good weekend, my friend. Have a cold one. Enjoy the sunshine and the weird weather that we get right now. But thanks a lot, my friend, for taking my call. Have a good one.
Thank you, Kyle. Take care. It's Kyle in Listowel, one of our regular callers. All right, we have to stop for a break. Eric, I see you on the line. I'll take your call here in just a couple minutes. Phone lines available, 1-833-668-2577. Call in, have your say on the air. Give me your take on the week, the events, the week that was, the tariffs, the response you heard from Mark Carney, the response you heard from Pierre Poilievre. Where do you think all of this is going? Are we in this for the long haul, or do you have faith that we can come to some kind of arrangement with our American friends once this election campaign is over? Who do you think is going to win the election? We can get into all of these issues and more here on Talkback. Just give me a call, 1-833-668-2577. I'm David Smith, in for Rob Snow. Today we'll be back right after this on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Yes, it is Talkback. I am not Rob Snow. Rob is off today. It's David Smith here, filling in. Hope everybody's enjoying their Friday. What a week. What a week. The markets do not like the trade war. Tough day on the markets again. It's not historically bad, but it's bad. S&P 500 down 5.25% right now. The NASDAQ down 900 points, about 5.5%. Price of crude oil is down almost $5, 7.45%, sitting at $61.96 a barrel. The Dow is at a session low now, down 1,931 points. That's 4.75%. Gold is down a little, but still up on the year. It's above $3,050 the ounce. So the markets don't like it. And you know what? I don't either. I don't like the trade war. I'm not loving it. How are you feeling about things today? The trade war, the election. Let's get into it. Back to the phones. Up next is Eric in Cole Harbor. Hello, Eric. You're on the air.
Hey. Oh, hi, Dave. How you doing today?
I'm doing fine. What's on your mind?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say thank you for bringing up the fact that Poilievre's rallies have been getting enormous crowds. Actually, you're the first media.
Huge crowds.
Yeah. You're the first media outlet. Now, I haven't heard any other media outlet cover that, but you did. And actually, I was going to bring that up to you. Second point I would like to make is I find this very interesting. Here in Nova Scotia, the Liberals provincially were very strong for a long period of time.
Yep.
Then just after COVID, they lost the election. The Conservatives came in for 2 years. And then now the Conservatives in Nova Scotia, just recently in the last election, have won a massive majority. And I'm wondering if federal, in the federal aspects of things, is that a harbinger of Nova Scotia normally going liberal federally, going conservative? And I wonder if that's true in other provinces. I have no idea exactly what has happened there. So I'm just wondering if that's something to consider.
Well, it's an interesting point. You know, I think what Tim Houston, your premier, the progressive conservative there in Nova Scotia, what he took advantage of when he called that snap election was a trend, not just in Canada, but worldwide, against incumbent governments. He kind of got ahead of that a little bit. And again, I'm going to bring up the polls because this is what we have to work off of. The polls say that the Atlantic provinces are leaning liberal right now, all of them. But again, that could change. That could really change. But it seems to be the Trump factor, the tariff factor, the trade war is the issue that's driving the most people's votes right now. If that were to change, I think we would see things swing back a little bit the other way. But as of right now, just looking at the polls, it looks like it's leaning liberal.
Yeah, I find that interesting. Personally, I don't put a whole lot of faith in the polls, but just as you suggested, it's something that it's a metric that you have to work with. The other thing I want to bring up, I think you were right on about the tariffs. Have you ever heard of Thomas Sowell?
No.
He's a very famous economist. Actually, he's 94 years of age now. And
Thomas Sowell. Yes. Okay. Yes, I have heard of Thomas Sowell. Yeah.
He said exactly the same thing you said. If these tariffs last for a short time, it might bring balance into world trade and make things saner when it comes to tariffs. He said that if it goes on for a long period of time, just as you suggested, that it could lead to a pretty grim recession and maybe a depression like you had in the 30s. The other thing I find interesting, I got to throw in a bit of conspiracy, because I have to do it. But I found interesting. First of all, just let me ask you: have you ever done any really serious research into the World Economic Forum?
Not exhaustively. I've poked around on their website, but that's about it.
Here's what I find interesting. One of their platforms, if I understand it correctly, is to have 15-minute cities. And I think you are aware of what that could involve. Now, what I find interesting, Poilievre said the other day, and David, I'm not sure if it's 50,000 or 500,000 homes that Kearney wants to build.
Yeah.
Tiny homes, right? Now, the thing that I found interesting was that he wants the government to do it, not the private sector. And also, all these homes don't have a driveway for cars.
Well, that's what Poilievre said.
I find that very interesting.
That's just what Poilievre said. There's no blueprint
I know.
for them.
Like I said, a little tongue-in-cheek, a little bit of conspiracy. You never know, right?
All right. Eric, I got to run. We're up against the break. Thank you. Have a good weekend.
Very much.
Thank you, Eric. That's Eric in Cole Harbor. I'm David Smith. Time is getting away from me here. We'll stop for a short break. We'll get right back to your phone calls on the other side. There is one free line for you now, 1-833-668-2577. We're back right after this on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Welcome back to the show. David Smith here, filling in for Rob. It's the Friday free-for-all. on Talkback. Full phone lines right now. Let's get right back to it. Rick in Dartmouth. You're on the air, Rick. Hello.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm good, Rick. What's on your mind?
I mentioned to Eric, he probably forgets. Just kidding. But Cole Harbor used to be part of Dartmouth.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
Anyway,
you have a lot of harbors down there on the East Coast.
Yeah,
A lot of coves, a lot of harbors.
Yeah, it's just, it's a suburb of Dartmouth.
Right,
but anyway,
right.
And we're all part of HRM now.
What's on your mind? What's on your mind, Rick?
Look, you mentioned earlier about oil.
Yeah.
The price of oil going down.
Yeah.
I think we got hit today with a 5 or 6 cent increase in the price of gas in Nova Scotia.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, we're laughing and crying at the same time. But what I'm talking about today is I tried to find out Mark Carney's net worth, and two numbers I came up with are $5 and $7 million.
Yeah.
Which I think are pretty laughable. If that's all he's worth, and we definitely don't want him as the prime minister. But because
why does that matter to you? Why does his net worth matter to you?
Well, here's what matters. Okay, it's not his net worth specifically. It's what he is invested in, and whether or not he is invested in stuff and that in other countries like China. And I know you've heard that before. But the reason that's a problem is because there are certain things that happen that you say, well, it's in a blind trust. So it doesn't matter. If my rental unit, I put it in a blind trust and I was in charge of housing for the government of Nova Scotia, I would still know whether decisions I made would help or hinder my other business. So that's
fair
the
enough.
problem I have with Carney.
Yeah. That's the thing with having a former leader of a multinational corporation with God knows what in his stock portfolio running the country, because we don't know what those conflicts of interest are. And the system we have in place, maybe it's a bad system, means that if he puts it in a blind trust, nobody ever gets to know about it. And that's that.
Unless he tells us.
Unless he tells us. But,
and if he won't tell us, then that makes me suspicious.
Yeah.
And I can't remember anyone else in recent history who would have that, maybe back in Mulroney days or Paul Martin.
Mulroney, though, it's in the multinational corporate era, I suppose, but like Brookfield as a multinational corporation is just so massive. They have their hands in so many different things.
Well, they buy real estate in China.
Yeah.
Okay, and they recently got a $2.5 billion, $250 million loan from a Chinese bank for their building that they have in Shanghai, I guess. Anyway, enough said.
All right, I got to run, Rick. We're right up against the break, but thank you. Appreciate the call. Yeah. And again, there's no evidence to suggest anything shady is going on there. Politicians like Pierre Poilievre have suggested that. But it is one thing that people don't like about Mark Carney, is that we don't really know what his business interests are and whether or not they represent any conflicts of interest if he does go on to become the prime minister after this election. I'm David Smith in for Rob Snow. Just coming up to the bottom of the hour, we'll get you up to date with the latest breaking news, and then we're right back to the phones on the Friday Free-for-All Talkback Hour coming up right after this. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to News Radio.
Something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Friday Free-for-All Talkback. Wide open on topics. David Smith here in for Rob today. Thank you for joining us. We'll get back to the phones. Who is up next here? I believe it is Paul in Cambridge. Hello, Paul. You're on the air.
Hey, Dave. How's it going?
Good. What do you want to talk about?
So, if I was a politician and I was, PM for the last 9.5 years, I'm pretty sure I'd be running my campaign on what I have done. These guys cannot do anything. They can't say anything of what they've done in the last 9.5 years. It's just ridiculous.
The Liberals, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah, see, that's interesting that you say that, Paul, because a lot of the support for the Liberals is really just because they have a new leader. But the case that Pierre Poilievre has been trying to prosecute is that regardless of who's the leader, even if you like Mark Carney, does this party deserve a fourth term? Do they deserve the chance to keep running the country? If you want my own personal opinion, the answer is no, regardless of the tariff situation. But that doesn't seem to be what's driving most people's vote. Is that what's driving your vote, Paul?
Well, I used to be liberal. Until, to be honest, I never really got into politics until COVID. And then all these restrictions and all these lies and how the media push lies. And it's insane how much I've got into politics ever since then. But, having a new leader is just putting lipstick on a pig. That's all we're doing here, really. And they have the same cabinet, same decision making. And I think we have Trudeau 2.0. And I think it's actually going to get worse. And I think the Liberal voters are just old school Liberal voters. They just stick to Liberal and then they don't, they have one source of news and that's it. It's good that you have the show because, you can get different opinions. And I think more people need to start listening to the shows like this so that they can get, open their eyes a little bit more.
Well, certainly everybody should be listening to this show, Paul. We can agree on that. It is the best show on radio. But no, like you're touching on a point that is important, I think. And I come back to the generational divide in the support for Mark Carney. This is just from one poll that was out this week from Leger. 47% of Canadians aged 18 to 24 voted in the 2021 federal election, compared to 75% of Canadians aged 65 to 74. So we know that people over the age of 60 are more likely to support Mark Carney. People under the age of 40 are more likely to support Pierre Poilievre. What might be skewing some of these polls is that the modeling weights an older voter more strongly because they're more likely to vote. But if we get a huge turnout of the 18 to 30 crowd, some of those models might not be that accurate. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. And this is to all whoever's listening. Bring 10 people with you and then tell those people to tell 10 people. We need to reset Canada. We need to get our country back. We are Canadians. Let's bring it back.
Okay. Thank you, Paul. Thank you for the call today. I appreciate that. Paul sounding a bit like Pierre Poilievre there at the end. Bring it home. Bring it home. That's Paul's opinion. I agree with some of what Paul said there, certainly. Again, the big question mark, if you want my own take, just one man's opinion, the big question mark, if you are thinking these polls aren't that accurate, is voter turnout. Because if we get a record high turnout in this election, that's a lot of people who maybe didn't talk to the pollsters showing up at the polls. Plus, on top of that, fun fact for you, I did an episode of the Big Story podcast a little earlier this week, speaking with a pollster, David Coletto. As much as 10% of the electorate of people who go to vote on election day decide who they're voting for in the booth. Did you know that? I didn't know that. I was kind of shocked by that. As many as 10% of people decide who they're voting for in the booth. That's a big wild card. Up next on the phones, we have Danveer in Calgary. Hi, Danveer. You're on the air.
Hi, David.
Hey, what's on your mind today?
Quickly touch upon the tariff thing. I don't think there would be anybody who's not affected by that. In generally market, I am myself into manufacturing, and generally it is kind of a wait and see approach. How I deal with it, avoid increasing your debt. So I think the Bank of Canada's policy of reducing the rate of interest is actually not a good one, because that is telling us to take on more debt, which we should not do in an uncertain environment, right?
Yeah, I mean, the bank's its only mandate is to control inflation, right? So they're going to cut that rate if they think it's going to help control inflation, and everything else is not really part of their deliberations. But yeah, you in your industry, a lot of debt. You're going to need to take on more debt, likely to get through this, right?
I think that would be a bad idea. You don't know what the future holds for you, right? So if you keep on taking debt and then the interest rates go up, then when the economy comes back, you are in a bad position. I don't know. You don't know where to invest, right?
Yeah.
So,
well, let me ask you this, Danveer. Who do you think, based on what you've heard from both Mark Carney and Pierre Poilievre, who do you think would do a better job negotiating with Donald Trump?
I think it would be equal.
Equal, okay.
It doesn't really matter. Like it'll be like Donald Trump say, how much noise Doug Ford was making. Like once he's reprimanded, he is like it's similar to having his tail in his legs, right? So
right.
So I don't know. Okay, that's besides. I actually wanted to say something about the news and the polling.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I think Pierre Poilievre, we need to give him a break, right? So it's not a level playing field anyways. Mark Carney's got the government machinery on his side, and then even the news. So most of the news, what he says changes, right? So when he introduced the tariffs, he said reluctantly imposing the tariffs, right?
Yeah.
But that was played only once on the radio.
Right.
And then it was changed to Canada Hits Back. So because that was the Liberal logo. Or
yeah. I hear what you're saying. Yeah.
So I think it's verbatim. The news organizations, at least they should qualify it as per PMO's version or Liberal Party's version. Otherwise, it seems like it's the analysis of the news organization, right? So,
okay.
And that would change the public opinion very quickly.
Okay. All right, I hear you. Thank you. We got to run for the break. Thank you, Danveer. Appreciate the call today. We have to stop here. Lots of talk about the news and the polls and the polls and the news and how we report on the polls in the news. Again, I come back to this. Nobody was calling us and saying they didn't believe the polls when the Conservatives were way up. The polls are the polls. They're not 100% accurate, of course. They're subject to change, of course. But right now, they're measuring a snapshot in time of public opinion. And the fact is, most people answering polls say they support Mark Carney. So that's how I am reporting it to you. Hopefully that's accurate. I'm David Smith in for Rob Snow. We'll be back right after this on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Friday free for all Talkback. David Smith filling in for Rob with you today. Let's get right back to the phones. Linda in Calgary is on the line. Hello, Linda. You're on the air.
Just a couple of quick points. It surprises me that a lot of people don't really realize that Mark Carney has been Trudeau's economic advisor for the last 10 years, both really connected to the World Economic Forum.
Linda, let me just jump in there. You sound like you're underwater. Are you on a speakerphone or something? We're having a hard time hearing you.
How's that?
I can hear you much better now. Go ahead.
Okay. So I think a lot of people, or people that I talk to, don't really realize the involvement that Mark Carney has had with regard to advising Justin Trudeau over his policies in the last 8 years.
Yep.
If you just ask anybody in Britain what he's done to that country, you'd get a real wake-up call. The second thing is that I'm really quite surprised at the intellect of people blaming Trump for everything that's going on in Canada. And I'll give you a couple examples. Over the last, 8-10 years that the Liberals have been in power, I mean, Donald Trump didn't chase $500 billion of investment out of Canada.
Nope.
He didn't cancel 14 energy projects that would have given us global access and not have one trading partner.
True.
And I don't think it's just the politicians alone. I've seen over the last, 20 years, if you even look back at the Beef Producers Association, when Mad Cow the border of U.S. was shut because of the mad cow, and lo and behold, 80% of our trade was done with the U.S. That's like putting 80% of your portfolio into one stock. No, nobody does that. So it's not only our government, it's people making decisions who have not any ability, but just laziness to go out and get other markets other than the U.S. It's insane.
Yeah, there's a certain amount of logic to that argument. But again, we are physically attached to and integrated with the largest consumer-oriented economy on Earth. Why would our economy not favor that relationship? That is our biggest advantage in terms of global trade. We don't have to put things on ships to get them to the United States. We send them on rail cars and on highways that are linked up.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't dispute that. But in our energy is probably the biggest thing. We could have been in the global leader in LNG, the global leader. And what I can't figure out for the life of me is the $10 billion that's gifted to Quebec every year largely comes from the revenues produced by Alberta. Why would they kill the golden goose that's feeding, the hand after they lost the war of whatever that was? We still making concessions. It makes no sense. They refuse to develop their own resources, yet they're really happy to take our $10 billion from our resources.
Yeah,
makes no sense.
No dispute. No dispute for me. No dispute for me on that. It's a point of frustration, I understand, for a lot of people in the West, and that you're not wrong about how you're characterizing it. Quebec, as a matter of government policy, has chosen not to develop natural resources, and they benefit greatly from the equalization payment system we have in this country. And I can't tell you not to be mad about that because it's not fair. It doesn't make any sense.
I don't think even being mad. I think it's short-sighted, and you don't have people ingenuitive enough to go outside of what's happening. It's like, this is what's always happened, so this is what we're going to do, and then one little hiccup comes and everybody's blaming Trump, and I'm going, well, Trump had nothing to do with the legalization of hard drugs in BC. Trump didn't do that. Trump did not protect the Canadian border. Trump didn't allow all the immigrants into our country, and now we're paying for it. You look at the demonstrations that are happening in down east right now on university campuses. Yeah. My goodness.
Yeah, all of these things are, they're not making anything better. No. And I have to run because we're up against the break. Thank you for your call, Linda. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
That's Linda in Calgary. And this is a point that the Conservatives have been attempting to prosecute on this campaign. It's not getting through yet. But it is true that if Canada's economy had not already been faltering before Donald Trump decided to end our free trade agreement illegally, we would be in a better position to weather this storm. And that's what Pierre Poilievre's pitch to voters is. Elect a conservative government. The Liberals don't deserve another chance to govern this country. They will do X, Y, and Z to bolster the economy and negotiate from a position of strength. Now, Mark Carney, on the other hand, says, well, I wasn't around for any of that. And I will also bolster the economy, and I will also negotiate from a position of strength. That is the state of the race here at the end of week 2 of the campaign. More calls coming up in a moment. I'm David Smith in for Rob Snow. A short break here. It's Talkback. One line available, 1-833-668-2577. This is News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
David Smith here in for Rob today. Thank you for joining us. It's the Friday free-for-all on Talkback. Let's get back to the phones. Up next is Robert in Calgary. Robert, you're on the air. What do you want to talk about?
Well, there's just two things that I'd like to mention. First of all, is most governments kind of talk about their track record and how they've left the country better and how they continue to make it better. But the Liberals right now in Carney is not saying anything about how great they have done, because everybody knows it's the opposite. And the thing that got to me this morning is him promising all these houses. Mm-hmm. That is over double the amount that Canada produced last year.
Yep.
In Calgary right now, we have a home. We can't get sewer hookup until this summer. And we've been in the works for about a couple of months now. It took us over 3 months, 4 months to get approvals, and we started, and we had to get more approvals. So it would take at least the whole term of Liberal government to overcome just the hurdles that are out there right now and the shortage of labor.
Yeah.
whether he's talking about the victory, coming home after the Second World War, but people have to realize there was one heck of a big workforce.
Yeah, exactly.
Coming home from a war.
Exactly.
To do all this.
Exactly, Robert. You've hit the nail on the head. And yeah, if you want my opinion, I don't think much of Mr. Carney's housing platform. For me personally, that's the most important issue for me in this election is housing affordability. And the idea that the federal government is somehow going to build 500,000 homes in relatively short order, I think is nonsense. I don't think they can do it.
Ludicrous. And the thing is, they have to take, if you think back, they're partly responsible for the problem we have right now with that open immigration they had for years. And even them at the end, Trudeau was saying, I think we made a mistake.
Yeah. Yeah, and they reversed course on that. They did reverse course, but many people would say too late.
Yeah, but it's too late now, but we're not going to solve that problem that quick because we don't have that trained workforce coming back from a war. And I hate to say coming back from a war, but we did have a large.
No, it's true. We currently have a shortage of skilled tradespeople in this country, and we have an immigration system that does not prioritize them. We have an immigration system that is totally out of whack with the needs of the labor force in this country, and that's why I think this number of 500,000 homes is they've pulled that out of thin air. I don't think it's realistic at all.
They've created, and the Liberal government is famous for coming up with something, and no one can say, and that's the biggest thing to me, is how to deliver it. I go back to when I was in corporations. We have those meetings, and everybody come up, this is a great idea. But then you go back next year, I really couldn't do it because I didn't have the people to do it. Yeah. And I think this is what they're doing right now.
Precisely. Yeah. All right, Robert, I have to wrap it up there. We're close to the break here. Thank you for your call.
Okay.
Good thoughts today. Bye. Yeah, Robert is paying attention. Yeah, Mark Carney's housing plan, it's being described as ambitious. Okay, he's pledging $25 billion in government financing to build prefabricated homes. Great. Are there enough companies in this country building prefabricated homes to take advantage of $25 billion in financing? No, of course not. So it's all well and good to say you have the money and you'll make it available, but you have to address the other aspects of the equation, namely a labor force. I'm David Smith in for Rob Snow today. A whole hour after the break, more of your phone calls. This is the Friday Free-for-All on Talkback on News Radio.
It's time to talk back.
On Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Call now
And have your say.
1-833-668-2577.
And welcome back to the show. I'm David Smith. Rob is off today. He will be back on Monday. It's the Friday Free-for-All Talkback hour into the second half now. Phone lines will stay open until the end of this hour. It's been very busy on the phones today. I love hearing from you, so let's keep it going. Up next, we have Dave in Calgary. Hello, Dave. You're on the air.
Hey, Dave. How are you today?
I'm good, Dave. How are you?
Good, thank you. Dave, I'm just calling in regards to a few points that I'd like to make. One of the things with this election that we have coming up, first of all, I agree with most of the things that Linda said. I hope the Canadian citizens listen to what she had to say. She made some very good points. We've put a lot of emphasis previously, or not previously, in the last couple weeks, month, regarding Donald Trump and who's best to deal with Donald Trump. I think we need to take the focus off that. We need to focus on who's going to be the best prime minister to run our country and make our country stronger. The Liberals have had over 9 years to do that, and they've failed miserably. So I think moving forward, that's something we shouldn't be looking at. Unfortunately, the polls are going in the opposite direction of that. In comparison to a hockey game, Pierre Poilievre's team was up by a large margin at the end of the second period. The Liberal Party went into the dressing room. They pulled their goalie or removed him from the game completely, the incompetent Trudeau,
yeah.
And they've replaced it with Carney.
Yeah.
It's the same team on the ice.
It is.
Nothing has changed. So I don't understand why our Canadians are thinking that putting in Mark Carney is going to be better for our country.
Well, I think some people, I've been thinking about this a lot, and I think some people are thinking about it this way, running that we have to figure out what Donald Trump wants and get a deal with him done before we can go back to really anything else. It's all secondary to this tariff situation. I don't know if I see it that way, because Donald Trump is simply so chaotic, so out of control. I don't know if he knows what he's doing most of the time, and I don't know if one way or the other, either Mark Carney or Pierre Poilievre is going to be any better at dealing with him. I know that they are already suggesting they would take different approaches to dealing with him, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit more as we make our way through the hour. But in my opinion, it's time for a change of government in this country, and I think that will help in these eventual trade negotiations, because you won't have all of the baggage of some of these names. Dominic LeBlanc, Melanie Joly, Francois-Philippe Champagne, Anita Anand, Bill Blair, Patty Hajdu. These are all the same people who have been in cabinet for the last decade.
Yes, correct. So it's mind-boggling to see that the Liberals are ahead in this race. And my point is that if Donald Trump is the cause of that, like I said, going back to my point, that we need to find a prime minister. We need to change prime ministers. We need to get the Liberal Party out of there. We need to find a prime minister that is going to rebuild this country, because they've destroyed our country. So, Pierre Poilievre is really the only choice that we have with respect to that. And it's just very alarming and concerning to see that the polls are swinging in the wrong direction. Hopefully, the day of the election, there's going to be a turnout that's going to flip that. Yeah, well, look, 24 days. We still have 24 days. We're not even close to halfway through this campaign yet. So things will likely change. Yeah, all right, Dave. That's my message.
Yeah, I got you. It's not over. It ain't over till it's over, right? That's,
exactly.
We don't need to get too far ahead of ourselves on talking about the polls. All right, Dave, thank you. Thank you for that. Let's go next to Dan, who is in Calgary. Hello, Dan. You're on the air.
Hello.
What do you want to talk about, Dan?
Well, with the election, the main thing is, as far as I'm concerned, I can never remember how to pronounce his name, conservative leader.
Pierre Poilievre.
Yeah, I mean, whether he would do worse, he can't do any worse than what Trudeau has done.
Fair enough.
By the same token, is there anybody, when it comes to being a prime minister of a country or the president, whatever term you want to use, when it comes down to it, is there a university course for that? No, there isn't.
Nope.
So, you have to hopefully find somebody that is sane. And the one thing with Trudeau, when he was, going for the election and so forth, everybody said, oh, he's such a good whatever. And a lot of people were saying, whether or not this is true or not, we're saying, well, he's got great hair, so he's going to make a great prime minister. I mean,
okay.
He's a movie star, and he's so out of touch with the common person in Canada. His circle of friends are the millionaire kids, and so he's not even on. He was never even on the same level as Joe Blow in Canada, sort of thing. So, and just recently, I had a conversation with somebody, and they said, in regards to Trudeau, oh, he's done a great job. It was a senior person, but it's like he's put our country in the toilet. That's a great job.
Yeah, I don't
understand that at all.
I don't think it was a great job from where I've been sitting for the last 10 years, but okay.
No, it's just, and so to have Jim Carrey or Carrey fellow, whatever his name is, and as you said with someone else, nobody seems to be looking at the fact of, well, what has the Liberal Party done? What's their track record for the past 9-10 years?
Yeah,
and it's horrible. So we got a different a different person that's the head of the party or whatever, and he doesn't have a riding, so I don't know how he can be elected prime minister in the first place.
That is how it works. You don't need to be a member of the House of Commons to be prime minister. That's just how it works.
Yeah, it's so everything is so ass backwards. It is beyond belief. It's like somebody saying, "Oh, nuclear power is environmentally friendly and it's green." What planet are you on? I mean, the fuel rods for a nuclear power plant are plutonium or uranium, whatever. How is that more environmentally friendly?
All right, Dan. Yeah, let me jump in because we're kind of wandering off here, and I have to stop for a break. But I've heard you. You've had your say, and I appreciate the call today. Nuclear energy may be a topic for a different day, but thank you for your thoughts. I do appreciate that. We have to stop for a break. More phone calls coming up next. I am David Smith in for Rob Snow. This is Talkback on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Friday free for all. Talkback. It's David Smith here in for Rob today. Thank you for joining us. Very busy on the phones today. A lot of people want to talk about the election, of course. It is day 13 of the federal election race. Does it feel longer than that to you? End of week 2, 24 days to go before we head to the polls to choose the next federal government. And Canadians continue to tell pollsters that the Liberal Party has their support. Mark Carney's Liberals are enjoying a 10-point lead in some polls, including in vote-rich Ontario. The polling aggregator 338 Canada this morning has the Liberals in position to win 198 seats. Wow, that is majority government territory. And the Conservatives in a distant second at 121. The New Democrats are looking at an historic election loss, losing official party status, poised to pick up just 7 seats. The NDP had 24 seats when Parliament was prorogued. But they're just polls. They're only so accurate. They are likely to change. But the overall trend is undeniable. Mark Carney is winning the hearts and minds of voters, and Pierre Poilievre is just not keeping pace. Insofar as this election is about picking a prime minister to negotiate with Donald Trump, so far more people are leaning toward Carney than Poilievre. The two leaders faced a major test on that file this week. I wouldn't mind hearing from you on that. How do you think Mark Carney and Poilievre did at meeting the moment? Were you impressed? Were you unimpressed? Neutral on what you heard from the two frontrunners this week? 1-833-668-2577. Back to the phones. Up next, it's Emerson in Calgary. Emerson, you're on the air.
Hi, David. Thank you for taking my call. Just on that last point you just raised. Number one, everyone's talking about Carney being in the best position to handle Trump. What the heck has he done? He hasn't changed anything. Trump says, this is what I'm going to do, and he went ahead and did it. So what? He said we had a productive phone call. That makes him the messiah that's going to come down and save everything. Are people really this disillusional? Like, honest to God, I talk to people all day long, and they're trying to figure out what is happening to people in Ontario. What are they smoking? Have they forgotten what Trudeau has done to this country? It's insanity. The other reason I'm calling is I am tired of Rosemary Barton, CBC, ambushing Poilievre every chance she gets. Last night she says, oh, Mark Carney looks so prime ministerial. Isn't it amazing how he's so calm and collective, and he just looks so prime ministerial? This is what we need when we're dealing with Trump. What carrot have they waved in her face? I mean, I know she's been a Liberal staunch supporter for years. Maybe there was a promise of a Senate appointment. It didn't come through or whatever, but totally disgusting. Totally. You know what? Poilievre made a comment about, getting rid of the CBC, and, that's her livelihood, and she's probably making sure that it doesn't happen. But honestly, I will say one thing. This race has not begun. It will kick off like a rocket launcher right after the debates, because I do believe they've got dirt on Carney that's going to be exposed during the debate, unless the moderator Steve Paikin doesn't allow it to happen. But if he allows them to go at it, I'm sure Carney is going to have dirt coming at him like a dump truck, and he won't know how to handle it. Because Poilievre is a master of getting across information, and he'll do it. I'm still confident it'll be a PC victory. Listen, CNN was projecting Kamala Harris was going to win 5 out of the 7 swing states and win the presidency. Where is she today? Where's CNN today? I'm not falling for these polls. They're all liberal, staunch supporters. Give it up, Buttercup.
Yeah,
it's going to be a conservative win.
But they're not. Like, just because they're showing a liberal lead doesn't mean that they are politically biased towards the liberals. They're just not. But you can say think that the lead that the liberals have is by no means set in stone. That's fair enough. But it's not fake polling. They talk to people, they process the data, they put out.
Yeah, but are people being honest? Are people being honest about who they're voting?
I don't know. That's what I mean. They're only so accurate.
Yeah.
But they show a trend.
Thank you. I thank you talking. You have a good one and a great weekend.
Thank you, Emerson. I did a podcast with pollster Daryl Bricker a couple of weeks ago, or last week, actually, and I asked him. I said, Mr. Bricker, CEO of Ipsos Public Affairs, sir, are you politically biased towards the liberals? And he told me no. We'll stop here. Peter and Langley, you'll be up next right after the break. I'm David Smith. This is the Friday Free-for-All Talkback. Lots of time to take your calls. Very busy on the phones. Thank you for your patience. We'll get back to it in a couple minutes here. This is News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Friday Free-for-All Talkback. It's David Smith here in for Rob today. The markets are still in the red. It's coming up to 2:30 Eastern Time, about 90 minutes left in the trading day. S&P is down. The Dow is down. The NASDAQ is down. The Russell 2000 is down. Crude oil is down. Gold futures are down. Everything is down on the markets. CNBC says this is the worst two-day slide for the Dow and the S&P 500 since the pandemic first hit. Thank you very much. President Trump feeling very liberated. Feeling liberated from economic prosperity. I'm feeling liberated from certainty. I'm feeling liberated from all sorts of things. Back to the phones. Peter and Langley. Thanks for hanging on there, Peter. You're on the air.
Hi there. I think I was going to talk about something else, but I think I've got a theory that can shed some light on what's happening in the polls.
Okay.
On so-called Liberation Day, I was following the broadcast, the commentary after Trump's dog and pony show there.
Yep.
And I was furious. I was furious all day long. I was furious at night, and I just couldn't calm myself down because it's something that's dogged me for probably most of my life, and that it just shows, everybody's talking about, Canada was spared. We escaped Trump's wrath, and what have you. And, I'm thinking to myself, my future, my life lies in the hands of some megalomaniac.
Megalomaniac, yeah. It's a good word to describe the president. It is a good word.
Yeah, and Canada, I've always thought Canada is a vassal state, and this just goes to show how it is. It's reality, and I just can't seem to get over that. So when I look at the polls, it comes down, what I think, to this. I think Poilievre, with all his talk, what have you, I think what he would do is he would concentrate on the economy, but I think that he would put us back into a situation where we're just more of a vassal state before, just integrate us even more into the American economy, and then, that's it. Carney made a very important announcement last week when he said that basically this deal we have with the United States, including the security and military, he said it's over.
Yeah, do you believe him? Do you think it's over?
Well, I don't know. My heart was racing when he said that, but that's my whole thing.
I think that's a heck of a thing for a prime minister to say.
It's unbelievable. I couldn't even fathom that, but that gives me some hope. Is that okay? If you're actually going to cancel the F-35 deal, you're actually going to disconnect with the U.S. militarily. Boy, that sure attracts me in a big way because I think of sovereignty, and I think that's what you're seeing in the polls is that this election is about sovereignty on one hand, which is what Carney is promising, and you're talking about economy in the other hand, which is what Poilievre is promising. And the reason Poilievre can't talk more about sovereignty is because he's not going to deliver on that. He's going to put us right back into the vassal state situation.
Okay. I hear what you're saying. I've got to cut you off there, Peter, because we've got just 30 seconds left. But you've made your point quite well. I think people are picking up what you're putting down. It's an interesting theory. I thank you for the call today.
Okay, bye.
Thank you. Yeah, Mark Carney is definitely playing into the sovereignty side of the anxiety that's out there right now. But, if you want my take on that, I think it's too early to declare that our relationship with the United States is over. Because Donald Trump won't be the president forever. It is in our two countries' best interests to be economically integrated. That case has been prosecuted and I think settled. There's an economic consensus on that. And I don't want the next prime minister of this country to enter those negotiations from a position where he assumes we will no longer have free trade. I think it's too early to call it off.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
The final stretch of Talkback for the week. David Smith here in for Rob Snow today. Just a quick update on the markets. I know I talked about them not too long ago, but the Dow Jones is now down 2,000 points on the day. With less than 90 minutes left in the trading day, the Dow is down 2,000 points. That is a serious hit. Market sell-off continues after Donald Trump takes his trade war global, with all of those tariffs announced on Wednesday afternoon. Now, a lot of people want to talk about the election on the show today, so I'm going to throw this out there for you to think about. On dealing with Donald Trump, the big question in this election seems to be which leader people think will do a better job at negotiating and navigating a trade war with the U.S. 75% of Canada's exports go to the U.S. They're our largest trading partner. After this election is over, our trade deal with the U.S. will be renegotiated. Whoever wins, both Poilievre and Carney have committed to that. So on Thursday, yesterday, both leaders spoke about their approach to those future negotiations of the Canada-U.S.-Mexico free trade agreement. And I listened to that closely because that's where all of this is heading. Not only the economic future of this country, but also this election race. So I was listening to that closely. And in my own opinion, I believe they are hinting at two very different philosophies on dealing with the Trump administration. So let's listen to Pierre Poilievre first.
We will demand an end to all tariffs, free trade, both ways. But third, we believe we can convince the Americans it's in their national and security interest to get a deal, because we will use all the proceeds of that deal, all of the economic benefits that flow into the federal coffers, to massively rebuild our military so that we can carry our weight and keep our continent safe. This will create a powerful incentive for Americans to say yes. But, of course, there's no guarantee with Trump. As we're learning, nobody in Canada can control Donald Trump, contrary to many of the suggestions and the unrealistic expectations that some have been setting. Which is why I have to make clear, and I will be making clear to President Trump, that any commitments we make that America wants to happen on defense, border cooperation, or market access can and will be instantaneously withdrawn if he violates any part of the agreement. We will only uphold our side of the bargain as long as he holds up his side of the bargain. That's how we create the leverage to protect against a president who changes his mind and breaks his word.
So Pierre Poilievre says he will demand a free trade deal. Two-way free trade, tariff-free between Canada and the U.S., like we had before Trump blew it up. And to incentivize that deal, Poilievre says his government would guarantee Canada uses any economic boost from renewed free trade access to address some of Trump's problems with us, like defense spending. Work with us and we'll work with you, with the ultimate goal of getting us back to a solid relationship with the U.S., both economically and diplomatically. That's Pierre Poilievre. Let's listen to Mark Carney talking about his approach to negotiating with Donald Trump.
As President Trump and I agreed last week, he and the Prime Minister of Canada will sit down immediately following the election to find areas of common ground and agreement in a new economic and security partnership. I told the President that I will be working hard for the next month to earn the right to represent Canada in those discussions to get the best deal for Canada under the new U.S. approach. At the same time, Canada must be looking elsewhere to expand our trade, to build our economy, and to protect our sovereignty. Canada is ready to take a leadership role in building a coalition of like-minded countries who share our values. We believe in international cooperation. We believe in the free and open exchange of goods, services, and ideas. And if the United States no longer wants to lead, Canada will.
In my own opinion, I hear a different tone coming from Carney. He doesn't sound like he thinks there will ever be a return to a solid relationship with the U.S. He's talking about isolating the U.S. He's talking about a coalition of other trading partners to replace what we might lose in terms of exports to America. He's not demanding a return to free trade, not the way I hear what he said yesterday. Mark Carney said he'll get the best deal for Canada under the new U.S. approach, whereas Poilievre says he will demand free trade. That's just an observation that I made when listening to both of these leaders speaking on Thursday. I'm curious if you have any thoughts on that. Do you hear two different approaches there? What would you think of the prospect of a world where we never again have free trade with the U.S., where the Canadian economy is no longer built on continental free trade with the world's largest consumer market, but instead built on a constellation of different global trading partners without the U.S.? Do you see that as inevitable? Is Mark Carney right to suggest that that's the end game here? Or do you have hope that we can one day get back to something like normal? A renewed free trade agreement with the U.S., a renewed diplomatic and economic relationship with the U.S. that's good for both countries. Maybe you think Pierre Poilievre is naive to think that we can go back. Maybe you think Mark Carney is naive to think that Canada can replace the U.S. as a trading partner. But one thing seems to be clear: whichever party leader presents the most compelling vision for dealing with this singular problem, that person will be Canada's next prime minister. What do you think? Just some things to chew on. Let's go next on the phones to John in Calgary. Hi, John. You're on the air.
Hi, thanks for having me on. I think the difference you're hearing is one is a politician and the other is a realist. What you're hearing from Carney is practical steps. We are a price taker in this market. We can't demand anything of the United States. What you're hearing from Poilievre is emotion and impractical steps. Of course, we'd love to demand something from the United States. That's not realistic, though, is it? So there's the difference that lies between them. But which one is better to negotiate a deal? Well, only one of them on the resume has anything to do with managing finance, being in the business world. The other one is a politician. It is clear, as my wife used to say, there's a difference between Mr. Right and Mr. Right Now. But what we need is Mr. Right Now. And that, unfortunately, because I'm in Calgary, is the Liberal Party and it is Carney. So any other view that Poilievre would be anything other than trouble, I think is misled. Let's take the emotion out of the discussion and have a practical discussion about which one of them is more qualified than the other. And it is Mark Carney.
Why are you so certain of that? Why do you think Mark Carney is so much more qualified than Pierre Poilievre?
I think his worldview, his practical business side to him. The reality is this is a huge financial complex problem to solve. Right? Everything else can be put aside. So which one of them has a background in complex financials and which one doesn't? And that is sufficient for me. Which one is more balanced? Which one is more acts more like a statesperson than the other? All of these point to Carney. Now, I'm no Liberal voter, but he is the right person to solve a Rubik's Cube of a financial problem.
Okay. Interesting thoughts, John. Thank you. Appreciate you weighing in today. That's John in Calgary. We have to stop here for a short break. We'll get right back to the phones after the break. Thank you for hanging in there today. Very busy. I'm David Smith in for Rob Snow. This is Now You Know. Talkback on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
It's David Smith here, filling in for Rob on this Friday free-for-all Talkback. Let's go next to Bill in Calgary. Hi, Bill. You're on the air.
Hello, David. Thank you for taking my call.
What's on your mind today?
I think the people of Canada better wake up to the fact of Mr. Carney. They have no idea who he is or what he's all about. For example, he's shut down all the pipelines going across Canada. No more oil shipped off the West Coast. And yet they spent $10 billion just buying Colonial Pipelines in the States, which he spent the last 2 years venting. He goes over to China and borrows $230 billion. And there's nothing against going over and borrowing from a bank in China. He went right to XAP, or whatever the president is, on a handshake deal. And you got to think that the Chinese are going to want something back for that.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but okay.
Moog Rees on the Exchequer in London, he said that Mr. Carney was 3 years ago collecting money to run for prime minister. In that time, he was advising Mr. Trudeau. Was he giving him good advice, or was he setting him up for failure? Like I think there's a lot. Like he hasn't been around. He hasn't been in Parliament. He hasn't spent any time that people don't know anything about him, other than like CBC says he combs his hair nice.
And yet, so many people, like the caller I had just before the break, seem to think that he is worlds more qualified than Pierre Poilievre to negotiate a new free trade deal.
And you cannot. From everything I've seen on it, David, I would think that he's going to come out more of a winner than Canada is. He moved his headquarters down to the States to get away from paying taxes. He bought a pipeline that now has no competition in Canada. There's just so much of this. And I heard you talking to somebody, they were talking about the small houses, and you had mentioned that Pierre Poilievre had said that. It wasn't Pierre Poilievre that said that. It was Klaus Schwab from World Economic Forum. That's where that came from. And he's also big into this World Economics Forum. They're going to really tie us up badly if they become involved in that. And then as far as Mr. Trump goes, I think he's doing everything that he's doing because the U.S. is broke. They owe $137 trillion. That's $330,000 a second they're paying every day in interest payments. And
what Mr. Trump has done is added to that debt because now they have to spend a whole bunch of money from the federal treasury to prop up farmers and other businesses in the U.S. who are suffering because of this nonsensical trade war.
I think they're broke. I think they have to rejig their whole system, David. I think they had no choice.
What do you mean they have no choice? What do you mean they have no choice?
The U.S. dollar is dying, David.
It's not dying. It's the preeminent global currency. It is the currency of commerce across the world.
How can you say that when they owe $137 trillion? 1 trillion seconds is 350,688 hours. 1 trillion seconds. And they owe $137 trillion?
Yes.
So I would say that the dollar's in it's like the UK after Second World War. The Americans became the strong dominant dollar, and I think you're seeing that the U.S. is losing that hedge right now, and that's what Trump looks to me like he's trying to do.
All right. Well,
And
if that's what he's trying to do, Brian, if that's what he's trying to do, he's failing. He's going about it the wrong way. He's making everything worse. Thank you for your call. Again, what Donald Trump is doing, and it's important to me that you all understand this, he is trying to undo 80 years of rules-based international order because for some reason he believes the U.S. does not need to trade with other countries. That is nonsense. If the U.S. doesn't trade with other countries, you can say goodbye to the entire consumer lifestyle that Americans know and love. Where are you going to buy your T-shirts if you start tariffing Vietnam and Bangladesh? Cars are one thing, oil is another thing, but everything else around you, down to the clothes that you are wearing and the shoes on your feet, the U.S. needs to trade with other countries in order to enjoy cheap access to those goods. You can't put that genie back in the bottle, no matter what your rhetoric says. This is News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Winding down the Friday Free-For-All Talkback for this week. It's David Smith here in for Rob Snow. One more call to take today. This is all we'll have time for. It's Brian in Waterloo. Thanks for hanging in there, Brian. You're on the air.
Hey, good job today, Dave.
Thanks. What's on your mind today, Brian?
I'm amazed at how many people are shocked by what we're seeing with respect to this trade war. People seem to have this sort of dumbfounded look on their faces, and they're surprised that Trump is doing this. And he told us he was going to do this. This is who he is. He's not a guy who keeps his word. His record speaks for itself. He's a twice impeached, 34-time felon, convicted sexual predator, and you elected him to the highest office in the world, basically. And now people are sort of shaking their heads going, I can't believe he's doing this.
Well, sadly, though, Brian, I think, and you heard a little bit of it with the caller before the break, which is why I got a little short with him. People just take what he says at face value, especially conservatives, because they want to believe that he's right, because he makes everything sound so simple and we'll do tariffs and we'll eliminate the national debt and everything will be honky-dory. And people just stick their heads in the sand and take that at face value, and it drives me nuts.
Well, this is what he's done, right? He's convinced everyone that he and themselves are experts, right? And nobody does research.
And everybody else is lying. Everybody else is lying.
Yeah, if it's fake news, right? And if you do your own research, which translates roughly to, I watched some random guy's YouTube video. That's their definition of doing some proper research and learning facts. So it's just a sad state of affairs. But again, the surprising part to me is that people are surprised. Everybody's sort of, looking on with this glazed look and going, I can't believe this is happening. It's like, you asked for this. This is what you asked for. This is what you voted for.
So what do you think in terms of the choice we have to make in this country? Do you think Pierre Poilievre or Mark Carney would be better to deal with Donald Trump, or do you think it doesn't really matter who it is?
I think that, two things. I think Carney is infinitely more experienced and fit to negotiate with Trump. I think Poilievre will probably bend to him because that's what he does. But I think that one thing that needs to change in the equation is Donald Trump. He's the one that needs to go because he's not going to stick by his word no matter what. I mean, he's the one who renamed the free trade agreement, didn't really change a whole lot in it, but told everybody it was the best deal, that had ever been negotiated between Canada, Mexico, and the U.S. And now he's dumping all over it, basically saying, it was a bad deal and it was his deal. So he's erratic. He's very unintelligent, and he's not going to go by his word. So I think while Carney is way more fit to deal with him. I think he's going to, whoever it is going to have their hands full with Trump. I think Trump is the thing that needs to change.
Okay.
There needs to be new administration in the States before any of this will go away.
Okay. All right, Brian, we have to leave it there. We're right out of time. Thank you for your call.
Thank you. Thanks for doing the show today. Good job.
Thank you very much. That's Brian in Waterloo. I am David Smith. And to Brian's point, hang on tight, everyone. I don't know what's going to happen next, but it's going to be a bumpy ride. This is News Radio.